Okay, I'm going to show you some of our animated linking options now, and by doing so I'm going to show you how to create a planet revolving, or sorry, a moon revolving around a planet. First thing I'm going to do is go up to Atmosphere, Load Atmosphere in a fresh scene, and we're going to go to Effects, Other, and we're going to select Outer Space and click OK. I'm going to go ahead and select our ground now and just hit delete. And now if we look at our preview, all we have is just our background, and there's no fog or anything in the scene. And if I go up here and do a preview render, we can see all of these stars in our scene. That gives us a nice little space background. First thing I'm going to do is load in a sphere, and I'm also going to position our camera so it's moved a little out of the way, or so it's more centered. And now the next thing I'm going to do is go over here to our layers panel and call this planet. And if we want to, we could actually create a layer for this. Layer 2, we can click on that and name it and call it planet and moon layer. And go ahead and just drag that planet into that layer. And now we could turn off this layer if we wanted to, and it won't show up in the scene. It'll show up as a render, but not in the preview. Next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and size this up a bit. So we'll select our planet, and I'm going to hit Shift on the keyboard and just size this up so it's a little bit bigger. And we're not going to be doing this to complete size, otherwise we'll be working with very large textures. When you're doing planet scenes, it's best not to make too large of objects because it can get a little difficult when it comes to the material editor. So I just zoom out the camera just a little, or actually not zoom, but moving it out. And now we're going to create another sphere. And this one is going to be our moon. I'm going to go ahead and size this down just a bit and pull it out to about here, and go ahead and just zoom out. Right mouse click to rotate our view, or move our view. And we can see that we have our planet out a lot farther than our moon out a lot farther than our planet. I'm also going to take sphere 2 in the layers panel, and I'm going to call it moon. And then there's one more object I'm going to be creating. And there's another thing I want to note. I'm going to go ahead and delete that new sphere we just made. But depending on where you have your views positioned, it will create an object in the center of your viewport. So no matter where the view is, I'll go ahead and create another one up here. And so this is a good way if you want to place objects, because it'll automatically place them in the center of all your viewports. You could also move this up, and we create another one, and now you can see we're up a little bit higher. But I'm going to select all of these new spheres we just made and go ahead and delete them. And I'm going to try to position this in the center as much as possible and make another sphere. And now I'll just click on it and sort of move it into place. And now this sphere is not going to show up in the scene because it's going to be controlling our moon. And I'm going to go ahead and change the name on this to moon, oops, sorry, not noon, moon control. And we'll click off of it. And now our moon control is going to be entirely hidden by the planet, so we don't need to worry about a surface for it, and we don't need to worry about it showing up in the scene. We're just going to be using it to control this moon's rotation around the planet. So I'm going to go ahead and select our moon. And also note too, depending on what objects you select, your viewports will also change their position to whatever you have selected and go ahead and center them. Not in the main camera view, of course, because that's controlled by keyframing, but in the top and the front and the side view, it will do so. If we go up here to our right tab, all the way up on the top, we're going to get our motion options. We're going to go ahead and select that moon control, or actually just the moon. And under link, we're going to link it to moon control. And I'm going to go ahead and center these back. And now we're going to select our moon control and click on it in the scene so that we get all of our options here for rotation. And I want to make sure I'm constraining it on the z-axis because we want our moon to be rotating around this way. And pretty much what we've done is we've parented our moon to this object. So whatever movement we do to this moon control, it will edit our moon. And I'll I'll show you right now by going to Animation, Display Timeline. It's going to bring up our timeline, and I'm going to create a 10-second animation. We'll just pull that until it says 10, and we have auto keyframing on, so it'll go ahead and record our keyframe for us once we make some movement. And now I'm going to grab this rotation right here, and as you can see, as I'm rotating this around, it's also rotating our planet. But since our planet is moved farther away from the object, we're getting a nice rotation. And if you also look in the lower right hand corner, you'll see that every time I circle around, as you can see, I'm just kind of circling around the planet with the cursor still clicked, still holding the mouse button down. You can see how many revolutions we're creating. It'll tell you your degree and then how many complete revolutions, and that's a nice little feature to let you know how many revolutions you're making. I'm just going to end it pretty much where we started, over here at 7, and let go. And now if we scrub through our animation, you'll see that we have a moon rotating around a planet, or the animation of that. So that's kind of a neat little effect you can do. If we go ahead and make a preview render of this, just go to Animation, Render Animation Preview. This might actually be going a little quick because we have pretty much 1 revolution per second. So if we look right here, we're not exactly getting full fluid movement, plus the preview render is not rendering every single frame to speed it up. But you can get an idea, mostly by looking at the OpenGL view, that we pretty much have our moon rotating around our planet. So that's a pretty neat little effect you can have there. Rotate our camera around. What you can also do with parenting, it's not just for rotation. If I go to frame 0 and I move this up, you can see in our other views that our planet is also being moved. If I turn off our constraint on the z-axis, no matter where I move it, it's going to come with it. But because this is parented to the other object, what we can also do, this is called the child at this point, and what we can do is move this independently of our main object, and then move this one with it. So whenever we move this one, we could also grab this one and move it independently. So that's a neat little animation feature we have there. And let's say too we want to work on maybe our background, and we want to edit that, but we don't want to see all these objects in our OpenGL view. What we can do, since it's in its own layer, is just click twice on it and make sure we deselect the object, and now it doesn't show up at all. Keep in mind, if you do select these objects, even with the layer off, they will show up. And then you can click off in this blank white area, and it'll deselect all of your objects. And now, as we can see, they still show up in our render, and even if we do a standard render, they'll still show up. But we don't have to worry about seeing them in the OpenGL view if we're working on maybe something else in the scene, or animate a spaceship, and let's say we just have a really complex planet, and maybe we have an ecosystem on it, and an atmosphere around it, and certain things like that, and you just don't want all that geometry taking up your processing speed while you're working on the scene. So you can just go ahead and hide those, and they won't show up. I also want to show you tracking now, and I'm going to file, create new, and daytime, not going to save changes on it. And targeting is another type of animation, or another animation feature that we have. I'm going to go ahead and create a sphere, and we'll actually set it up a little bit higher. And on right mouse click, I'm going to create a box and kind of move that off to the side. And now we're going to look at tracking. If I go ahead and set to track, actually we'll select the sphere, and we're going to track our cube. Now if we move our cube around, we can see that it's moving our object, rotating it along with it in sort of a reverse link, and that's kind of a neat effect. What you can also do is move around the sphere, and you can see that the sphere is always facing our cube, or at least the same side of it is always facing it. And that's kind of neat things you could do. You could do it with lighting too. If we clear those objects out of the scene, we're going to move over here and create another sphere. And now we're going to create a light. So we're going to go to our lights, and we're going to create a spotlight. And we're going to move this up, and we're going to set this to track sphere 2. And now if we go ahead and move this light, you'll notice that it's always facing our sphere that we have right here. And this is kind of the same motion that's already applied to our sunlight, because if we move our sunlight around, it will always face, if we move it in the view, it will always face the camera or the center of the scene. And it kind of works the same way, so we can go ahead and move our light around, and this way it will always face the sphere and always have it lit. So there's lots of neat little things you can do with that. You can create as many lights as you want, and I'll have them facing at an object. And you could also do this with camera movement. So if we go ahead and we're going to expand our main camera here, and we're going to select the main camera, not so that we rename it, but just select it. And under track, we want to track our sphere. And now if you notice when we got a little bit of a glitch there. I'm going to go ahead and move this out. Let's see, we're getting a little bit of movement here. I'm going to go ahead and rotate this around. Move this out. And right now, because actually our motion, the way it's set up, we actually have a reverse action going on. But our camera, as you can see, is following the sphere object. So no matter where we move the sphere, the camera is going to track it. And the reason we're having those little glitches before is because we weren't entirely facing the sphere before we set up the tracking on it. But as you can see, we can go ahead and move this object around, and it will automatically follow it. So that's kind of a neat little feature. If you have like an airplane scene and you're flying through buildings or something like that, you can set up tracking on the camera and move it, and no matter where the object moves, it will stay in the same part of the screen, because as you can see, our background is just moving and not our object. It's staying exactly where it is. I mean, of course it's rotating around because we're kind of adjusting the camera, but it's just a neat little thing you can do for creating certain special effects and certain camera movement.